Now, I want you to follow this account. It's a good one. Kanakoa.substack.com. It's at Kanakoa the Great on Twitter. I saw this yesterday. It's a pretty amazing thread on just how people within the government abuse their positions when we start to tell the truth and expose their misinformation, how they do the dipsy-do flipperoo and accuse us of misinformation. He notes in his tweet, you know this guy, Richard Stengel? He was the founder of our State Department's Global Engagement Center. Oh, that sounds serious. He describes his job as a chief propagandist. Here's Richard Stengel talking about propaganda being a really good thing. Keep in mind, this guy was a government employee at the State Department. Check this out.
There's another word for master narratives. It's called history. Basically, every country creates their own narrative story. And you know, my old job at the State Department was what people used to joke as the chief propagandist job. We haven't talked about propaganda. Propaganda, I'm not against propaganda. Every country does it, and they have to do it to their own population. And I don't necessarily think it's that awful. And this idea of a news cartel. I mean, I was editor of Time in 2012 during that election, and I remember, you know, you're competing against cartels and everybody. I remember being on a panel with the then editor of the New York Times who said, it's really hard to break through these days. This is the editor of the New York Times saying it's hard to break through. I wanted to jump off the platform. Like, what's it like for the rest of everybody? So, I mean, there are cartels, but cartels don't have hegemony like they used to.
So this former State Department guy describes himself as the chief propagandist for the government. He's really upset about what he calls misinformation. He's really equally upset that the New York Times and others don't have a monopoly anymore over the information exchange. In other words, he's upset that shows like this get you the truth. So they use propaganda to label shows like this disinformation. And what do they use to attack us? They use actual disinformation. Do they really? Well, Richard Stengel, it turns out, was deeply tied to that group, Hamilton 68. Weird. That's the group that just got busted in the Twitter files for claiming to Twitter that a bunch of accounts were Russian bots that were, in fact, not Russian bots and had nothing to do with Russia. Here's Richard Stengel's tweets. Hamilton 68 is fantastic. I touted it on Morning Joe today. If we'd only had it during the election. Joke, he said this guy's like the Klaus Schwab. Like he's like a Bond villain. Like it couldn't be more perfect. They just give themselves up. Here's another gem, a Washington Post op-ed by Richard Stengel. Why America needs a hate speech law. Arguing again to shut you up when you expose their misinformation. Here's another gem of a tweet. Richard Stengel promoting the Steele dossier pee-pee hoax. Just saying, someone, Christopher Steele, decided correctly to contact the FBI when he saw a foreign power meddling in a U.S. election, while others connive with that foreign power. Don't shoot the messenger. He believes in the pee-pee. Of course, he doesn't really believe in it. Oh, and here he is promoting another one. Remember Bounty Gate? The Russians had bounties on our shoulders. The story completely on our soldiers, excuse me. And Donald Trump did nothing. The story was totally made up. Richard Stengel was glad to talk about Bounty Gate with the great Nicole Wallace, the queen of vocal fry at MSNBC. Folks, let's just go back to the beginning of the segment. Biden and others are sold out to China. China's been doing this to us forever. We don't want to respond because our government is bought and sold to China, military people too. So when people like me expose what's going on with our government being bought and sold to China, our government, people like Richard Stengel, attack us as disinformation specialists using what? Disinformation. The irony of it all is just profound.